before they apply for a master's. They make so many calculations about the potential ROI, what are the jobs available, what's the salary.
Yeah, because when
Right.
I went to LBS, what happens in Europe, which is not common in India.
Unlike in India, we have placement cells in universities abroad or in countries abroad. You do not have that. So how did you really navigate through applying to so many jobs?
Through like LinkedIn searches, you try to understand who is hiring, what are the roles open.
How do you think consulting interviews were different from other interviews?
When you go to consulting interviews, there's no core knowledge needed.
Tell us about how many interview rounds you had for McKinsey and how was the process like for you?
Hi, Vanshika. Thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations for cracking McKinsey. It's a big achievement for anyone who's aspiring to work outside India, and McKinsey is one of the target firms. So, if you could just give me and everyone, all our audiences, a brief introduction of yourself so far.
Hi Anya, hi Vani. Thank you so much for having me. I currently am working at McKinsey in the Dubai office as a business analyst. I graduated from London Business School. I did my master's in analytics and management, post which I joined McKinsey. Before that, I was at JP Morgan. I was a quant researcher, and my bachelor's is in computer science engineering. So for me, it was a little bit of a career shift. But yeah, that's in short my experience till now.
Wow, great. So you mentioned that you did your undergrad in engineering, right? So what made you realize that you want to go for a master's? And as you rightly said, you were already working in one of the bulge brackets in India. So what really drove you to go for a master's in the first place?
I think one of my first top reasons was exposure. To get that exposure of meeting a diverse set of people, of interacting with them, changing your perspective. That was one part of it. And second was I wanted to gauge some of the management experience because my bachelor's was purely computer science, but my master's
Right.
was analytics and management. So we did parts of analytics where yes, I was able to still like code in R, SQL, and Python, but also we got on top of it the usual management skills that one needs, marketing, business, accounts, and all of that. So for me, it was to yes gain the exposure, but also to kind of spread myself and understand more about the business world apart from just being like a coder or a back end engineer in my previous job.
Right, nice. And as you mentioned that, one of the key reasons was exposure, and apart from that, also to get in some management skills essentially. But what really, like, did you have any career goals entering the masters?
Yeah, so I feel my observation, based on a lot of people who enter their masters, there are usually two kinds of people. The first one
Yeah.
being way more than the second one. The first are who are very sorted, who know that after their masters, they either want to pivot or they want to get into a bigger company in the same domain. Like maybe they're in a tier two consulting firm and they want to go to MBB, and they're very sorted of how they want to do. But for me, I was the second lot who were not sure. For me, it was like, okay, I get the exposure, I gain perspective. I try to understand what opportunities are there once I do my master's. And then I wanted to choose based on a lot of things. So in my entire time, I applied for a plethora of roles. I applied for everything from a quant researcher at Morgan Stanley to a BCGX data scientist to a McKinsey consultant, because for me, I wanted to explore the entire breadth of options I had after my master's.
Which is interesting because I think many people, right, before they apply for a master's, they make so many calculations about the potential ROI, what are the jobs available, what's the salaries that they deliver, what are the areas that you can apply to. And this is very new because, one perspective that you just brought in light is that you just enter the area, you get exposure and you know about the different industries, and then you figure out as and when you apply about, what is a good fit, and you just figure it out along the way.
Yeah. And I think it's a different way to kind of approach the job market because some people are very like particular on the kind of roles they're applying to. And I think in a
Yeah.
job market in today's world that I mean that does not work for everyone. So they end up
Yeah,
exploring later when most things have closed. So I think this is a good way to kind of navigate the market now at least.
yeah, because when
Right.
I went to LBS, I think what happens in Europe, which is not common in India, is if there's
Mhm.
audience coming from India, is you have like a set companies where there's a full campus placement culture. At least if you're coming from an engineering college, they have a lot of emphasis on it, where you get the links of which companies are coming in, what are the dates. There are full calendars and sheets, which does not happen in a European job market. So that way, it's very different, and hence you also have the liberty to apply to whatever you want. You're not restricted to your campus suggesting you things which are good for your profile. But for
Right.
me, I'll tell you that initially I wanted to explore the venture capital aspect of it, and then I did apply to some venture capital jobs. I did some interviews, but through the interview process I realized that that this is not the first job I want out of my masters. Maybe later I will come back to, this, maybe a private
Right.
equity or a venture capital like thing. But right now I'm not ready for it, given the fact that if you have more experience, you get more exposure, and that gives you better opportunities in the same industry per se. So that was my first whip. And then I think second, because I was doing analytics and management with Vani, a lot of our classmates were applying to all these analytics roles across
Yeah.
startups, because at that specific point of time, big companies were not hiring. So I did
Right.
apply to some startups for these analytical roles, and which were mostly based on data analytics, business analytics, crunching numbers, getting insights. But throughout those processes, for me, I was not able to convert a few of them, which I really wanted to, because again, these were
Hmm.
small and medium enterprises, or so-called like 5-10 year old startups, which is not a startup anymore, but still those are not like big companies. So unless and until,
Right.
for me, I felt that if I'm not very confident in their product or in their trajectory or what exactly they're doing, because again, there was a specific niche that you would get into if you get into these roles.
Right.
I did not feel like taking the step where I found that fit with any of the companies to be joining. And then I thought that for me personally, I think this was 6, 7, 8 months into my master's, then I realized that I probably want to go back to a brand name as my first
Hmm.
job after my master's, maybe for a couple of years. And then I would like to dabble back into whether VC or joining a startup as a product manager or things like that. So then I realized towards a little bit like at the 8, 9 month mark in my 1 year of master's, which is not very ideal, that okay, I want to go back to the bulge bracket. And then I started applying to 2 or 3 industries. I did not narrow down because I saw my friends applying to consulting and giving like, I don't know, more than like 30 interviews in a row and not being able to convert. So that did not seem like a logical option for me to double down on one industry at that point. And I was open to be, exploring more skills. And also I feel in a way that sometimes the interview process also filters you out, because if they're not
Right.
taking you in like 40 interviews, that kind of would mean at the end that you might not be a good fit for that industry where you think that's where you want to go, but you might not be the person that they're looking for. So I think my last two were like I was applying for data scientist consulting sort of roles, which is
Hmm.
BCGX and Quantum Black at McKinsey, and then pure consulting roles such as McKinsey itself and a few other small firms here and there. So that's what I applied to towards the end, and McKinsey converted at the right place at the right time for me, and this is what I joined later.
Right.
This is not the stereotypical path from what I understand, because most of my friends did like, okay, they went to consulting or they went to the analytics part and they were through and through doing that. But I did it a little differently, which is obviously your personal choice how you want to go about it.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point that you mentioned where you decided to go for a big brand name right after your master's rather than a startup or a VC, because I think it's easier to switch from a bigger brand name to a startup than from a startup to a bigger brand name. And it kind of gives you some security and some credibility in the market. So maybe if in the initial years anyone has a choice of going for a brand name, that could be a safe option, because after that there will be startups who will be happy to take you considering you have the credibility of working with a good brand name. So, I mean, of course, not everyone's lucky enough or not everyone's fortunate enough to land a job in one of these big brand names. But if there's an option, then I think it's a safer way to go about it.
And
Yeah.
also another question, you mentioned that you apply to a range of industries, right? From niche consulting firms to hardcore consulting firms and so on. So, and as you mentioned that unlike in India where you have placement cells in universities abroad or in countries abroad, you do not have that. So how did you really navigate through applying to so many jobs which did not have any, like just a list of your companies that you have to apply to, and there were so many roles, so many companies, so many places. So how did you really manage through like keeping a track of where to apply, what to change in your CV or your cover letters per se?
Yeah, I think for me, how I started is the classic, you have your Excel sheet, industry wise split, like different types of roles that you want to pursue. And then you have your top 10 or 20 companies. I think a very logical way to go about this, like you say, you want 3 industries. For example, in my case, it
Mhm.
was okay, venture capital and let's say some analytics, and then the third was consulting. And you go whatever country you are in and whatever country, let's say, you want to be in, you check out the
Right.
top 20, 30 firms and you put it on the sheet. And then you go to their pages or through like LinkedIn searches, you try to understand who is hiring, what are the roles open at one point of time, and then you go one by one. It's super tedious. And I think one of the big issues is that people get demotivated in the middle.
Yeah.
My understanding with this was that you're supposed to only get like one job, and that is what it takes. You don't have to convert like all the 30 or 10, right? Because you end up
Right.
going to do one thing. It's totally fine. I think one is to be motivated, obviously be organized, have your Excel sheets, then go to LinkedIn to check. And the third is after you know, right, okay, for VC, I like these, let's say, top 10 positions, which make sense
Right.
to me based on my background, what I know. And then you try to reach out to the people who are working there. And the best is if you can use your alumni network. Like, for
Right.
example, for McKinsey, the person who guided me through the whole process was actually this a person called Rafael Torres. He was doing McKinsey Chile office at that point of time, and he was one of those people who was sponsored by McKinsey and came to LBS, for his nice 2 years, and so was going to go
Oh,
back to some
nice.
of the US office. So I think it's very important after you're done with your list, after you have all the job opportunities that you think are there, and obviously the more keep coming. If you just search on LinkedIn and you have some alerts from some websites and all, and then you go out and talk to the people who have done something similar in the same company or a sister company or the same role. And I think it's a plus if you can find it in your LBS alumni and your business school alumni network. I think that's the reason that we
Right.
go to all business school to meet those people and make all of these interview processes easier. And then I think you can hopefully convert some of these jobs after the practice for the case solving and whatever else is required. Also, my understanding is in terms of the basic processes where we're talking about just getting or landing an interview, the tests are different, but they're very similar. It's mostly aptitude, it's quant. So all of those you can honestly prepare for most of the places generally. Maybe some
Right.
finance things would be different, if you're applying to an IB role, yeah, some caveat to that. But I think all the consulting, venture capital, or if there are any other analytics, yeah, some coding
Mhm.
involved sometimes. But most of them, the basic aptitude test is the same. You can prepare in the same way. What gets specific is
Right.
obviously once you get an interview, then you reach out to people, you understand what the process is from the people who have given those interviews, and then you carve it out from there.
Right.
Mm.
I just have a general question that I think both of you. Why do you guys think, like you mentioned, it's always best to reach out to your alumni and tap that network. Why do you think, like, what is it that makes you as an alumni help people from your school better than maybe someone, for example, in our case, we're all from LBS. So in your case, for example, if someone is reaching out to you from LSC, would you be less inclined towards helping them compared to someone from LBS? Just a
I
personal.
don't Yeah, I don't think for me personally, I won't say I would be less inclined, but definitely if someone from my understanding is right when we go to these like business schools or these big universities, because you see, so for me personally, I saw how much the alumni or my seniors help
Mm.
in the interview process. It changed the full game for me. So I kind of feel that I owe it back to at least help one more person in the same
Right,
way. So it's more of that
right.
giving back mindset. So you are
Yeah.
more, not more probable, but more sensitive or
I
more caring
understand.
for
Yeah.
someone from your own. Yeah.
And I also think LBS in particular has created this tight knit community and they have imbibed this feeling in you where you want to help other people. Even in our batch, we were always helping each other out and we were trying to, it was not, it was a group effort whenever someone was taking an exam or
Right.
whenever someone had an interview, we were all always trying to help each other out rather than being very competitive about it. Of course, there's some
Correct.
competition, but I think there was more of group effort and more of helping each other out than just being very
Yeah,
competitive.
yeah,
I think
because
it's also an
I
LBS.
Yeah.
think like almost around LBS, right? When we did our case prep, Vani used to be one of my neighbors, and then
Yeah,
Anika was one of our flatmates, and there were so many people. We did all our case preps always together, and
Yeah.
I think you were applying for some other firm that did not matter. It was mostly
yeah,
like, okay, I help you prep, you help me prep. It's
yeah.
about the community.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes a great business school great in the first place. Like if you see any ranking, methodologies also, you'll always find alumni network as one of the criteria that they look at. Essentially because the strength of the alumni network really plays a role in how good the future students of that same university are doing
Yes.
because that sport really matters, right?
Right,
Yeah.
I okay, now back to the topic. So
Yeah.
you're talking about your about how you manage the entire application process, how you organized it. So if we talk about consulting in particular now, since that's where you're working, so I think you'll have the best expertise. So how do you think consulting interviews were different from other interviews? Of course, there's case prep, but how did you prepare for consulting interviews in particular, and why do you think they're different from other interviews?
I
Hmm.
think consulting interviews, a little bit of a difference is that there is no material. So if you go for, let's say, a Morgan Stanley quant researcher interview, there's sort of a material that you need to know, in terms of your coding skills, your Python, your understanding
Right.
of the markets, how do you price something and stuff like that. When you go to consulting interviews, there's no core knowledge needed. Yes, there has to be the case prep aspect of it, but that's more logical, that's more reasoning rather than actually having some sort of knowledge or content backed things, right? Apart from maybe, yeah, a few formulas here and there, or like a few facts that you usually want to remember for guesstimates and stuff. Apart from that, there's not a core knowledge needed. Similarly, if you go for like an IB interview, right, you need to know the finance, you need to know how do you do leverage buyout and those kind of things. Again, not needed for consulting. So there's not a lot of focus on the content part of it. Then moving on to the case prep aspect, right? When you start prepping, obviously, if you go to any business school, if anybody enters anywhere, you will see that that's one of the biggest things that you see people doing in libraries. Everyone's case prepping everywhere, every time there's something happening, some competition, some society, some community. But I personally feel I don't want to come with that sort of a privilege aspect of it, where yes, I did not do the case prep for like a year or something. So whatever I would say might be taken with a little bit grain of salt in that context. But my personal thing when I applied to McKinsey and when I knew that I'm like 3 weeks or a month to that interview, how I approached it was, yes, I did like good number of cases, but let's say less than 20. But my thing was to always go back to the cases and know my learnings rather than doing like, because I had friends who did 50 or 100. I mean, maybe that worked out better for them. I did less number of cases, but I made sure that I dissected. I spent like 2 hours after a 1 hour casing interview to understand where I went wrong, what could have gone better. And whatever this is, I'd put it in like another like sheet of paper or a notebook. Okay, these are the things that I don't usually look at. And then always keep referring back to that sheet of like my mistakes or my errors which I had throughout. I think that gave me a lot more perspective in the casing aspect. So I was more of a quality person over a quantity person with my case prep. And I
Right.
think one of the most important things is when you go to a business school and let's say your end goal after 2 years or 1 year is to land a consulting job, you'll always feel that weird jitter of starting case prep because it sounds like
Hmm.
such a fancy word and you don't know what's there in that black box. What helped me was, if you have some free time, 20 minutes, just go to YouTube and check out all those case prep interviews where you get to be a fly on the wall on someone else's interview and you don't have to speak or think. You don't even have to like
Right.
calculate when you ask, that try out this question. Like, no, just listen to it. A first couple of times, I think that warmed me up a little bit to this concept of
Right.
case prepping. Again, it was different from the having knowledge or having content expertise as compared to the other interviews that I was preparing. I did that and that made me feel comfortable. And once you see
Right.
what is happening, then you realize, okay, it's like logical. Okay, you can do
Right.
it. You get that confidence to move on.
Correct.
And I also think, like what you mentioned, case preps are very logical. So some people who are, for example, quantitatively better or quantitatively stronger might have it easier. It's very similar to GMAT prep, I would say, where you can't really mug up stuff or there's no technical knowledge to learn. It's just the logic behind things that you need to start understanding or start building a way of thinking, which is very important. So, like you said, I think I faced a very similar issue when I was prepping for GRE. After my first attempt, I realized what was more important is not solving as many questions as you can, but making sure you're going back and spending some time and understanding what you did right and what you did wrong. And even though that's, I think, the most boring part of
Yeah,
any topic, because I enjoyed solving questions, but going back to it is quite boring. But I think that is a game changer. So for case preps as well, I mean, Vanshika literally did less than 20 cases. I can vouch for it. I mean, she didn't have a lot of time before her interview and she just managed to pull it off. But I don't
Because
think
you started case prepping after you got the invite from McKinsey.
Yeah, I did not do like case preps. I did case preps for BCGX that I was applying
Yeah.
to at that point in time, but those cases were technical. It was more like, okay, if you have to build a B2B SaaS platform for an XYZ company, there was 20% business aspect of it, but 80% was like, what would the software look like? What would you have? Like what
Right.
MLP, whatever. So very different.
But also,
I think
I feel that I think you, as you said, that there's a logic to it that you have to get you have to train yourself against, and once you do that, it's easy for you to do that. So, do you think that it was easy for you, maybe because you were, like natural aptitude wise, you had that knack of solving case studies, but some people who probably do not know the structures and who just have to work harder towards getting a knack of how to go about case studies. Do you think such people require more time, right? Naturally, they do. So how does one figure out how much time do they require? For example, for GMAT, GRE, people have a similar question that, okay, some people take 2 months, some people take 6 months, but how do they really realize that, okay, this is the time that I will require? Similarly, for case studies, what do you think is the ideal amount of time, or how will one person ascertain the ideal amount of time for them personally?
I think, right, taking on for example for GMAT, like this is my personal observation, given that I had so many
Right.
friends who were applying at that point of time and giving GMAT and all that. I think there's this sweet spot when you give a GMAT that you should give it under like 3 months of your preparation start, because after that, your score sort of plateaus, which is my personal observation. I don't think there's maths to back it up yet. But I also, my understanding is with these things, there's
Yeah.
always a sweet spot beyond which major improvement you cannot get by like solving more questions or doing more cases. So there is that aspect of it for sure. Now coming to your very specific question, Anna, which makes a lot of sense. I know there are people for whom this aptitude aspect of it is not easy. I think what
Yeah.
approach they should follow is obviously first get comfortable with what a case prep is or what a case interview looks like. You look at the YouTube videos, be a fly on the wall. That would be my step one to do it. So I get comfortable, or I at least understand, right, what is expected, like how does
Right.
it roll. Yeah.
Right.
And then the second would be to go to your case structures. My understanding is usually they are not more than like 12 or 15 that you can cover. Yeah, right. And I'm assuming that if someone is at a business school, is at one of these top universities, creme de la creme, then it would not be a very difficult task for you to even memorize those like 12 structures that
Hmm.
are there. So obviously scribble them down, put them on your wall wherever. I think I did that for one point of time because I'm not like a memory person. I forget things. So I just got it. I
Yeah.
put on a piece of paper, you put it on the wall, you just like going, coming, you look at it and you remember it in a
Yeah.
month or so, right? It becomes like in your head. And okay, once you're done with the structuring, once you're comfortable, and then you start solving maybe the mock drills if you want to do. I
Right.
was not the person who did that, but I knew a lot of people, who had some specific issues with some parts or some sections. So you can try going on with the mock drills along. Obviously, after you're done with the structure, you understand it, you should start doing case prep. If you think there is something missing, some specific part going wrong, then maybe do the mock drills. And my understanding is, yeah, obviously you would need, there's a minimum number, not a minimum number of cases, but yeah, hygiene level, you should do at least 10 or 15 to get it all
Right.
out of the system. After
Correct.
that, I think it's more about, yeah, the 15, please double down, please cross check, go back, cross reference, see your mistakes, see where you're going wrong, understand the logic, rather than, because I
Right.
feel in cases it's fun. So we will do more than dissecting. It's easy, to just do like two with your friends every day and stuff. It becomes a
Right.
social thing. But yeah,
Right.
then I think after you do the first 10, 15, go
Hmm.
dissect, maybe spend like 10, 15 days not doing more cases, doing some mock drills, understanding which parts are the problem for you, where you're always stuck. And after that, then you do like maybe one or two more cases, and then you try and judge, is your performance going way up? Is it making that like an exponential difference or a linear difference? But you will start noticing maybe at the 20, 25 mark, it will plateau, like your performance might just hit like this level, which is a very high chance, which is probably like, which is your maximum, where you are now ready, where you just need to revise. I think it's, so the curve goes like, okay, you don't know anything, then you grow linearly a little bit, and then you at the end plateau. When you see yourself like plateauing, I think that's where, if you
Right.
really think it's not enough right now, you have to put in a lot more effort, or that's where you
Right.
say that, okay, this is my capability, and now I want to go and do interviews at that level.
And I also
Right.
feel after a point, once you're like, once you plateau, like Vanshika mentioned, then it's more about whenever you case prep, it's more about learning from the other person and their way of casing. So what I would do at that point is I would start prepping with other people who are at that level or who have practiced enough, and then try to learn from their way of casing and pick up some tips, and again make sure that I'm noting it down somewhere so that I can keep that in mind when
Yeah.
I'm solving a case. So I think after a point, once you're done reviewing your stuff, then the next
Yeah.
step is to start picking up things from someone who is good at casing and their style of casing, and that also really helps. But again, that can also be done until a certain level. That will not add a significant value after a point. And then it will just be about maybe keeping in touch before an interview or practicing 1 week before the interview to make sure you're familiar with it and in touch and not taken aback when you have to solve it after a long time. So I think, yeah,
Right.
that's about it.
And is the type of case interviews the same across all the companies, or there are certain types of company that ask a particular type of case study questions and a certain set that ask certain different types essentially?
Okay, I think yeah, that's what I also wanted to add to Vani's point. That was very smart, right? When you plateau, you learn from others. Maybe you can like get some improvement, but after that, it's about what company you're applying to. Like for example, towards the end, I think I did a couple with the guy that I was mentioning, who's in McKinsey right now, and
Mm-hmm.
that gave me a lot more depth to understand the structure of the interview. The cases, I would say there are two types of things, right? The first is like what type of cases being asked. That depends on the firm sometimes. But if you're applying to these general big bracket MBB or tier two consulting or any of that, I don't think that matters unless and until you're applying to a specific consulting firm which has an expertise in maybe marketing or pricing or distribution or B2C consumer, then that is a different theory where you actually try to double down on the cases in that specific
Right.
industry. You're applying to these firms which are generalist in nature, which do every kind of thing. So I think there are 2 3 ways to go about it. The first one is you stalk your interviewer and try to understand what in the industry they do, which may or may not work. I've seen it working for some people and not working for the other. The
Mm-hmm.
second way is to that you reach out to someone who has given the interview either recently or maybe works at the same company. Like in my case, I reached out to this person at LBS who was working at McKinsey, and there when you do a case with them, now it's not about the industry. Now it's more about how a specific company structures their entire interview. Yes, 80% of that interview is going to be around the case, but sometimes a case is structured differently. For example, at McKinsey, usually we see those issue trees or those structures at the beginning, and mostly a lot of times the so for example, if your issue is like your issue one, and then you have L2 level things and L3 level things. At McKinsey, your case would actually start at the L3 level. So you cannot use your issue tree, which some people don't realize because they try to learn all of this. That okay, for example, there's usually the question would be why is the profitability down, and you would go on to okay, the revenue is low, the cost is high. Then you go okay, the revenue is low because less quantity, less price, and the cost is high because XYZ. So a normal consulting case might start with the question why is profitability low. Some consulting cases might start with the question why is revenue low, but you still have these branches. But at McKinsey, when I gave my interview, they started at the level where they're like, okay, the revenue is low because the profitability is low because the revenue is low because the quantities are low, and now how you solve it. So it's that difference
Got
between the firms. Understanding is yeah. So for McKinsey, that person for sure tried to make me understand. Okay, this is how it's gonna be, and then let's say 15 minutes we are going to delve into this issue tree, which is going to start at the very end of your normal mugged up issue trees. So you need to have your brain in place, and be logical. The second aspect of it would be that they would give you a quant problem, like something around numbers to solve, and the third would be the classic that you'd have to give recommendations. So the person helped me drill down the structure of the case in my head, which might be different for a different company. Maybe BCG does
Right.
the order differently, or they have a different perspective. That is the 80% of it, and the 20% of it would be again different. Like for McKinsey, it's mostly behavioral value based questions and understanding of you as a person, how you've done in the past, how do you want to do in the
Mm.
future, things like that, again, which is unique to each company. So in short, I think when it comes to the very end, when you're going to go give interviews, first is yes, if you know that your firm is industry specific, go dwell into the cases of the industry. Second, if you
Mm.
think they are not industry specific, the most logical thing to do is go out there and case with the people who have actually cleared those interviews in the past, hopefully your alumni or your seniors. That is the most helpful. The third is maybe try stalk the person and see if they give you the same case. Not recommended and usually doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think in your like what you mentioned for McKinsey in specific, whether the starting at L3, I think that's because they don't want to spend time on things that they know students have prepared, that everyone has prepared for, and they kind of do not want to. They want to see if you can actually take it forward, right? वो तो सब कर लेते हैं from L1 to L3. Everyone knows what to do. Everyone has memorized that structure. Everyone knows what to do, and they'll probably everyone will do the same thing. So they just start from a point where the differentiation starts, where you actually need to start using a logic. And it's something you cannot prepare for a lot, like we said. You kind of just need to have some logic in your head in a way like about how you're gonna structure it, but you cannot really prepare for it particularly on how to go about it, because there's nothing technical. It's all about using your industry awareness or using your general awareness about things, and of course your quantitative skills. So makes sense. That's
Right.
quite interesting. Maybe you can tell us about how many interview rounds you had for McKinsey and how was the process like for you?
So we start with the first being your initial screening round, which is a game which McKinsey has made it look like super fancy and very lucrative to stand out. But I think after you clear the game or the assessment, then you
Right.
have typically three interview rounds, which are very similar in the structure, which I told you. 80 to 70% of the time is spent on the case. Then obviously there's that 10% time where they talk about your journey, your resumes, like yeah, we skim through, they ask the questions, what have you done, what is this, what is that. And then there's that 15-20% of the time spent in understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your behavioral values, do they match to McKinsey's and things like that. And obviously there's that 5% part of the small talk, which I think which is very important to master. Like one of my things when I went into my interviews was it was in the London office, at the McKinsey London office. Everyone had flown in from the Dubai or the Middle Eastern offices because applying for here. And when you walk into that room, it was in person. So if you actually strike a nice, good conversation in the beginning, like 2 minutes, I think that makes the person remember you. And also that gives you some personality, because all of the other things, everyone's going to come and say, everyone's going to do the case prep. So for me, the trick was one of my dad's friends actually had a restaurant on the same street as the office. So I just go in and say, hello, what are you guys doing after this? You should try this restaurant. My dad's friend owns this and all of that. And I think they would remember that one girl who made this stupid weird comment when she came in about this. This is what you should do when you're done and tired for dinner. It's a very good place. I highly recommend and stuff like that. So I think, and honestly, I said that to every interview. Like I didn't have enough time. I was already anxious to think about what small talk to make. But just to show some personality or something, you should definitely try warming up. Initially, I tried like, hey, how are you liking London, the weather? But everybody had like, they were like, who likes London? Who likes the weather? What's wrong with you people? Like, it's always great. So I dropped that one on my second interview. But yeah, try to have that little bit of a personality in the 5%. And
Yeah.
at McKinsey, there's the ending 5% of the interview where the interview tells, do you have any questions? You can go in with your general questions about McKinsey work, McKinsey culture, la 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 la. But what trick I followed was that at the beginning, always the interviewer kind of introduces themselves, right? You sort of make notes of like 2-3 main points and try to ask about their personal life. That makes it more personal and the person remembers you. For example, some person told me that, okay, they were also at Morgan Stanley doing some quant IB work. And then my question to him was like, what do you see the difference? Are the people as savvy as they are? And that's like our personal link that, okay, I came from JP, you coming from Morgan to McKinsey, how do you see that shift? And I tell him my observation and he tells him. So to have that kind of a personal connect, starting 5%, ending 5% makes a little bit of a difference in the person remembering you, because that person is going to take at least 20 interviews that day. So you need to stand out a little bit through some things at least.
Fair, fair.
Right. And okay, one question I had, regarding the previous conversation that we were having about really knowing about what the type of questions being asked in that particular industry or company's case study interviews are, right? And you really have to reach out to people, practice specific to that particular company. And that made me realize that you cannot really make it a numbers game ever, because the minute you're doing that, you're sort of compromising the amount of efforts you can potentially put into the company that you have applied to and have gotten an interview of, right? So in that regard, like, but at the same time, I do realize that people panic once they're not, getting interviews, or even if they're getting interviews, they're realizing that, okay, even after 10 interviews, conversion is not taking place. They start panicking, right? And it's difficult to then put your mind together towards that one company that you have gotten the interview of. So how do you like keep calm during that time, or how do you not yourself, get under that pressure of applying to as many companies without putting all your efforts towards that one company that you really, really want?
I think in this specific scenario, it's again, right, it's like this balance between the number and the quality, that you cannot like slack out on the number. Specifically with the current job market situations, you cannot apply to like less companies, because that is going to skew your chances. And obviously you cannot go ahead with you cannot depreciate your quality, because that again reduces the amount. I think you need to have this very basic understanding, because it's very personal in the sense, right, how much can you actually be like, give your 100%, how many applications can you go through. So
Right.
just have that personal sense where you understand the quality is decreasing because you're doing too much. If I want to put a number, right, I think it's not unrealistic to say you can do 3 or 4 a week, maybe, with a decent enough quality, right, when you're putting in applications, given that uh, a lot of the things are similar. Even if you're applying to 2 to 3 industries, your resume might not change a lot. So you can at least do like one maybe every 2 days, give it like 1 hour or so to understand about the how what changes you want to make to the cover letter and the resume part. This is I'm talking about, like, the 3-4 months where you're intensely applying. You can do that. And if this is not the season or you're a little early or ahead, you can do like maybe one a week where you are switching in. Specifically talking about the industry for your case prep and all that, I think it's very I have like this feeling or this understanding about it is, right, that yeah, you might just go into the niche and you might end up going to the interview and the person asking you something completely different. That is also possible, which happens with a lot of people, where you think that okay, this company does only XYZ and you only do a prep for XYZ, and then the ABCD is left out of the picture and you step in and they're talking about that, and then it's downhill from there. So I would suggest maybe talk to like 2-3 people to understand. That could be different people in terms of, okay, someone who has given it recently and cracked it, someone who
Right.
works at the company and is an alumni from your university, so he knows the ins and outs, and
Hmm.
maybe some of your senior who worked there at one point and like last year and now are there with you at business school. So maybe have like these 2-3 different data points to understand what the process is like and what actually is being done. But I would not highly recommend going down that rabbit hole of being super specific in the industry and not thinking about the breadth, because again, I feel even if your consulting firm is in a niche or something, but there's still a consulting firm and they would not really test you a lot on the knowledge, maybe 20% out, 30% out there, but it would be still logical.
Right.
Per Anna's question, the panicking thing steps in if you're not getting interviews. I think if you're getting interviews, you're so you understand how much prep goes into it, so you don't even have the time to like
Yeah,
apply
not panic. No
excessively
time
or
to panic
panic.
sometimes.
Yes, you're always prepping, and it's a very good position to be in because you become hopeful once you get the interview, right? So you work really hard towards it, and there is a good chance if you were a smart person, you have a fair chance of getting in if you get the interview. But I think the panicking thing comes up when you don't even get the chance to interview. Once you feel like
Yeah.
Right.
not getting interviews. So I
They
think
don't
that
realize or understand what's going wrong.
yes, and that's when people panic and bulk apply, which I think is not entirely wrong because it can be a numbers game, right? There's a lot of luck involved, a lot
Yeah.
of it. So then I think it's not entirely wrong to bulk apply before the interview, but if you're getting interviews, you automatically limit yourself, I feel. And Vanchika, I have
Right.
one question. How important do you think cover letters are for big companies, maybe McKinsey? How important do you think cover letters are? Because I'm not sure about it.
Yeah, same. I think for McKinsey, I honestly don't remember putting in like a cover letter at this point. But I honestly think it's better to put in your time and energy to get a referral than to put in your time and energy and to make a
Yeah.
cover letter. I think that would be a better push to try someone get a direct referral, or try someone get you in contact with the HR. That's way more useful than putting an insane amount of energy to doing cover letters. And also, I feel there's this aspect of it where, yeah, right, you're applying and you're not getting any sort of interview calls, which is like
Hmm.
not a good position to be in. I was in that. But in that, okay, there's this aspect of it, right, where you reflect and you understand what are you doing wrong in your application processes. But honestly, sometimes it's not you, it's the market. So you might have the perfect application, they just not hiring, or they just need like one person and like there are 10,000 kids applying, so they can't help it. I think it's very important to understand that all of everything is not your fault. Maybe some part of it is, doing your application properly, having a good resume which is understandable. Yeah, those things are on you, but everything else is not your fault. You can't have all the situations in place. The cover letter aspect, I'm not 100% sure. I think it's very company dependent. But I would genuinely, personally, if I go back and do this process all over, I would spend more energy getting referrals, getting contacts of the HR, over spending a lot more time doing cover letters and trying to find people whose name you can slip into and all of that. I don't think that makes that
Oh,
massive a difference as much we think.
God. I think a last
Understood.
question and then we'll wrap it up. For me, it
Right.
is. I just want to understand how your experience has been at McKinsey. I think it's been almost over a year since you've been at McKinsey. So, how has that been? And do you enjoy it? And do you plan to stick, or what do you see yourself doing maybe the next 2, 3, 5 years?
Yeah, I think it has been quite a different experience in terms of, where I was before. Now I get to experience a lot of different industries. Just like I went into business school with a very, open mindset where let's see what I'm gonna do. That's how I am at McKinsey, where my mindset right now is to try to work in as many industries that I see excite me. So I have done healthcare. I also did like private equity, and recently I've been doing something around travel, and I also did something around oil and gas. Obviously, being in Dubai, that is the most common things that you get to find. But definitely, so for me, my mindset around approaching McKinsey is that, this is one place, or these big consulting firms are places where you get to pick and choose whatever industry you want to be in. And also, this may or may not be your best place to find, your true passion, and then you can stick to it in whatever way you want. Like, for example, if I feel and if I decide that I really like healthcare, I can either stick to healthcare at McKinsey, or I can become something in healthcare outside McKinsey. So for me right now, it's more about the first 2 years trying to test a lot of industries and see where my passion lies, because I am not aware of that, sadly enough, right now. Like, what is my thing that I want to do, like, for the next 20, 30 years? I don't know about it, and I'm still figuring it out, honestly, through this journey. So whatever interests me, I think that would mold what I want to do after it. Maybe, like when you come into these consulting firms, you can build an expertise in a couple of industries, and then you can become the C-suite or executive level for these SMEs or MNCs in the companies outside. You can have your own ventures in those specific industries after you get enough knowledge of like 2 to 3 years of exposure. And obviously, there's this classic going to private equity, the consulting VC path, which is out there. And also, you can do an MBA, though we did our masters, but obviously, there's this possibility of doing an MBA as well. So I think these are the options that are in front of you. For me, I have still not decided. I'm still taking it, one day at a time, and trying to understand what I really want to build out of it and what interests me the most, which I can commit to for, let's say, the next 20 to 30 years as like a full career option.
I think that's the
Right.
best part about consulting, right? You don't need to know what you want to do, and it gives you the opportunity to explore so many industries in a span of a year or two, such as your case. And that's so cool. Like, you don't need to have it all figured out because most people don't, right? But for example, if you get into a niche industry, for example, if you get into IB, you don't get the perspective of other industries. But in consulting, you have the opportunity to explore different industries and then pick and choose which one you like. So that's super cool.
Right.
I have one small question, and then I'll give it to Anya. Just one. You had mentioned that you took help from someone who was working in the Chile office of McKinsey. So, do you think these processes remain same across regions, or do consulting processes change depending on, like, the interview process changes as per region as well?
I think I also thought it would be different, but for me, I was like, okay, he can give me a benchmark. The actual interview might be near to that. But then when I went in, it was literally the exact same format that the person has told
Oh,
me, even down to the T, where they always start at L3 level. And then they will obviously, after that, have like a quant thing where you have to do a lot of calculations, or what do we call it? It's like the visual round. So they usually give you some weird graphs and some charts to figure out what it is. And even, those things were similar. So I think at least for McKinsey, I see that there's massive consistency
Oh,
throughout. It was very similar, pretty much 90% there to whatever he said, even like in the same order of things that he said, like first this will
oh.
happen, then this, then that.
So I think should be the case for all big companies.
Hopefully,
yeah, it's
I
across
think
them.
it should be standardized across big companies is what my understanding. At least it is for McKinsey, probably for a lot more as well.
Got it. Got
Right. Okay, now the last question of this entire interview, I will say. But yeah, okay. So, since we now work and we are building any device and we help students get into the top universities across. So one question with respect to that, the same question that was asked for McKinsey, the same question for LBS. How was the experience like? Do you think it was a game changer in terms of getting into McKinsey? Would you have done it otherwise as well? Or, like since you were already doing a very good job in India, do you think that LBS was still worth it, considering the job uncertainty that people have outside of India nowadays, given the job market precisely?
I think for my case, right, LBS definitely is worth it because it gives you a little more perspective and grows you as a person. I'm sure there would be people out there who have been into good colleges before, like maybe in India, if you're in an IIT, or maybe outside, you're in the top 100, all of those. But doing a master's specifically in the European region gives you a lot of a different perspective, because there is diversity. Specifically, LBS, we have people from so many countries, so many cultures,
Right.
and which also continues throughout these big firms, right? Just similarly, how there was this emphasis on diversity in LBS, so is there at McKinsey. Like my team, last team that I worked with, one person was coming from the China office, one person from Germany office, one person from Belgium, and then there was
Mhm.
someone who was a local. So I think that those kind of values, the pedigree and the experience, if you are pursuing all of these big companies which are at the same level as your university, you will see the same thing happening again and again. Everything looks very similar. Your group project at LBS is pretty much very similar to how we kick off a case here, or like a project here at McKinsey. So that experience definitely makes it worth it, because when you go into these big corporate organizations, you know what you're doing, and you have been in those situations before, so you have that kind of exposure which you might not be able to get in an undergrad, or when you if you're just in India and stuff like that. So definitely gives you that sort of an exposure, a level of confidence, a perspective, and how to navigate through these situations. And the other part of it is that it grows you as a person. Like personally, you have much more rigor and resilience, and you are able to have that confidence that okay, you'll figure it out, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
If you can go
Right.
live in a random country or alone with people you've never known,
Yeah.
yeah, you can figure out some random problem at work, it's fine. So I think that definitely gives you that push.
Right. One
Right.
follow-up question there. Um, at McKinsey, do you think it matters to have an LBS brand name or any brand name in general? So, especially, I'm not talking about the India office, you're in the Middle East office. So, if you talk about that in particular, do you think the people around you have good schools, good business schools, or good schools in general on their resume for them to be there? Because I think MBB is what I feel is quite brand
Brand
conscious.
conscious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would not say everyone is, but I would also say that okay, right? If you enter at McKinsey and if you tell them that you went to LBS, you went to INSEAD, you went to Harvard, MIT for that matter, it's more like okay, it's not like okay that it's insane the other person, because that other person you're telling that you're from LBS, that other guys from MIT. So, but it's more like oh, okay, cool, yeah, 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 we are the same lot. I think it's that
Yeah.
sense of belonging, but it's not 100% that everyone out there is from these B schools and stuff like that. Yes, there are people who are not and who are also equally smart. That doesn't take away from any credit from them, but I think yes, there is a little bit of that pedigree, right? Because they expect you to hit the ground running, and specifically coming from these schools, you have that sort of ambience. You have worked with those kind of people, you have worked in those stressful situations, the sort of deadlines we have here, the kind of work we do. So I'm sure they look for familiarity in that way when you go and you introduce yourself and you're coming from a good school or from the top 10 or whatever business schools out there.
Right.
For sure, it's more like that. But I mean, yeah, you're definitely not discriminated if you're not coming from
No, no,
that
I mean,
school.
does it make your application, like, does it make your, like, does it increase your chances of getting into McKinsey, for example,
I
if
mean,
you,
I would say it would definitely increase. See, right, right. They look at your resume before they give you an interview. So
right,
if you have an interesting resume, the resume could be interesting because
right,
you went to a fancy school. It could be interesting because you just made a startup and quit it or something like that, right?
right.
So that definitely gets you a foot into the door. And I mean, yeah, for a lot of people who are, let's say, going to these M7s and whatever, the most interesting part of their resume somehow becomes like the university. So yeah, that gets
I
you.
understand, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You could
Fair,
be more interesting. Could have done cooler stuff for sure. But yeah, I think
Right.
that's the
fair,
classic recipe, right? To at least get a foot in the door. But I
fair,
think at
Yeah.
the interview, it doesn't really matter. Like interview is your own
right.
merit, like how you perform your skill.
Fair, fair, fair. I think I have everything I wanted to ask, Anya.
Same, same. I think it was great, great conversing with you and got a lot of insights. I think before this, I also hardly knew anything about consulting per se. But yeah, gave me a lot of insights, and I'm sure it'll give everyone who's viewing this also a lot of insights. So thank you so much for taking out your time. And it was great having you.
Yeah, I think
Thank
you structured everything quite well, and anyone who watches this video will have some perspective on how to start. So that's great. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, I mean, I think 1 year at McKinsey, I need to structure things well, or I have no credibility here at this point.
That's all consultants do anyway, so you better do that well.
Definitely, yeah. But thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. I hope I answered all your questions. If anybody has any more, like, happy to answer. If you all want to text or in the comments or anything, more than happy to take it forward.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Vanshika.
much.
Thank you so much.